Demonstrations in Sudan against Omar al-Bashir continue, despite crackdowns. 25 years after the Rwanda genocide, neighbors are learning to forgive each other. And how uneven access to health services is driving life expectancy gaps. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. The streets of Khartoum remain chaotic as thousands of anti-government protesters continue to line the streets in protest of President Omar al-Bashir. Sudanese police have been instructed not to confront citizens and peaceful gatherings. That's according to the state news agency SUNA, citing a police spokesman. In a joint statement Tuesday, the U.S., Britain and Norway said Sudanese authorities must respond to protesters and deliver a credible plan for a political transition. They also called on Sudanese authorities to release all political detainees and remove all restrictions to freedoms. Early Tuesday, gunfire was heard outside the Sudanese military headquarters, Khartoum. The shots rang out as demonstrators seeking the ouster of President al-Bashir continued for a third consecutive day. Large groups of protesters have been gathering outside the compound since Saturday, calling for the end of the president's 30-year autocratic rule. 6 people were killed in Khartoum when security forces dispersed the protesters. Protests against al-Bashir's administration began on December the 19th amid allegations of economic mismanagement that sparked soaring food prices, fuel and foreign currency shortages. Bashir imposed a nationwide state of emergency on February 22nd in an attempt to suppress the protests after an initial crackdown failed. Reporter Naba Mohideen is monitoring developments in Khartoum, and a short time ago, she spoke by phone with VOA's John Tanzer, managing editor and host of South Sudan in Focus radio show, about the latest protest developments.
The latest is many forces like student militias and security forces and riot police are trying to move protesters away from army headquarters by attacking them every 6 hours. And the attack at 2 a.m., at 8 a.m. every day is a very, very violent attack. Some people are killed from the 3 sides, from security side, from army side, and from protester side. But the latest thing is police forces just issued a communique saying that they will never attack protesters, and the sit-in is getting bigger, and the estimated number right now is 2 million people around the army headquarters.
This latest communique from the police, it could be from activists or it could be from anybody. What is the proof that this is coming from the police? Was this an official statement on a television or on radio?
The first thing, yesterday, Reuters interviewed the Minister of Interior. They said they confirmed the number of the people killed. And today, media office of Sudan Police has just released it, not an activist, a very reliable communique. An eyewitness also noticed that this morning, like riot police, they didn't attack people. So only security and student militias are attacking army protesters and other people.
I've been watching the Sudan television this morning, and they are showing pictures of the garrison, the military headquarters, where there are no people. I mean, have you watched Sudan television this morning? Is that the clear picture of what is happening in Khartoum?
No, I have eyewitness, and I can send you, and I can tag you on live on Facebook, that 2 million at least of people are in headquarters. So this is very old photos, and this is the official governmental channel, so they must show this. But right now, all of my friends, my family, my colleagues, every journalist I know in Sudan is in the headquarters.
Well, that was reporter Naba Mohideen speaking with John Tanzer, VOA South Sudan in Focus managing editor. The months-long anti-government protest in Sudan reached a new level last weekend when tens of thousands of people marked a 1985 military coup with a sit-in at army headquarters. As protesters called for President Omar al-Bashir's resignation, troops unexpectedly confronted government security forces who were trying to break up the protest. At least 6 people were killed and dozens injured. Sharon Shahid narrates our report for Naba Mohideen.
23-year-old Suha Osama and her family have been marching against the government of President Omar al-Bashir since protests began in December.
I'm going to protest with the whole family. We won't come back until the regime falls.
But what started as a march Saturday turned to a sit-in at military headquarters.
We've been protesting for 4 months since December 19th. We have only one demand. The regime must fall down. We won't go backward. We won't compromise. Everyone will sit here in front of military headquarters until the regime totally falls down.
President Bashir on Friday night had called for dialogue with his opponents. Elections, says Sudan's government spokesman Hassan Ismail, are the only possibility for change.
The door to dialogue won't be closed. The government's mind will still be open to deal with anything in the political arena. Its hands will be open for anyone, even those who refuse dialogue, who raise their demand to bring down the government instead.
But on Saturday, the same possibility for changing leadership in 1985 was raised, a military takeover. As security forces moved in to clear protesters, Sudanese troops stepped in, confronting and clashing with security personnel. Sudan's interior minister said Monday that at least 6 people were killed in the weekend protest in Khartoum and 2,500 others arrested. Analysts say the protests over food and fuel shortages have snowballed into widespread anger at all aspects of government.
Street protests are a result of accumulations lasting for a long time. The inaccessible power structure and defensive approach eventually resulted in failure.
The actions of Sudan's military has no doubt sent a shiver through the presidential palace. Regardless of whether or not the military goes further, the biggest challenge to Bashir in his 3 decades in power are the thousands of determined protesters like Suha Osama and her family. For Naba Mohadeen, I'm Sharon Shahid for VOA News.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is calling on all parties in Libya to immediately engage in dialogue to reach a political resolution to the ongoing conflict in the northern African nation, declaring there is no military solution. Late Monday, Guterres offered UN help to jumpstart the discussions towards peace. His comments came after forces loyal to military commander Khalifa Haftar acknowledged responsibility for an airstrike that hit the only functioning airport in Tripoli. No injuries were reported from the strike at the Mitiga airport, but the attack forced the airport to close for several hours.
We're now trying to destroy very large parts of the enemy forces outside the city of Tripoli so that they become weak inside the city, after which there will be another plan to deal with them. Things are going well.
Well, Libya's UN-backed Prime Minister Fayez Jarrah is calling the action by Army General Khalifa Haftar an attempted coup. Meanwhile, in anticipation of violence, the United States has pulled a contingent of troops out of Tripoli. Now, for more on the U.S. military and the situation in Libya, VOA Pentagon correspondent Kalabam joins me live from U.S. headquarters outside of Washington, D.C. Pentagon. Welcome, Kalab. You hear me? Now, here's the question. Security in Libya has, of course, been dicey for several months. The question is, why is the U.S. withdrawing this particular set of soldiers at this point?
Well, the primary reason is that on April 4th, Khalifa Haftar announced that his self-titled Libyan National Army was going to march on Tripoli. Ever since then, there has been increased uncertainty in Tripoli, and the commander of U.S. forces in Africa, General Thomas Waldhauser, said that it was just unpredictable and unstable, so they pulled out their forces just to be safe.
Someone may want to know, what role have the U.S. soldiers been playing in Libya all this time?
Well, the U.S. role in Libya has primarily been focused on 2 things: helping to protect the diplomatic assets of the United States and its allies in Libya, and also helping with the counter-terror operations. That's training their partners to fight against terror groups, and also conduct the United States counter-terror operations. As you recall, the United States conducts airstrikes against violent extremism groups like Islamic State and Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb. They conducted 6 last year. The last one hasn't been since November of last year when several militants were killed. But that's primarily what the United States is doing. They are staying out of the civil war. They are remaining neutral, one official told me here at the Pentagon. But they are urging that this is not a military fight. This needs to be a diplomatic solution to the civil unrest.
So the question that naturally lends itself to being asked is what would happen to the rest of the soldiers that are left there if things escalate and get worse?
Well, it is my understanding, Vincent, based on speaking to officials here at the Pentagon, that all of the United States forces have actually been pulled out of Libya at this moment. But if you notice how they worded how they pulled out, they said this is a temporary relocation. So the expectation is that these forces have been moved somewhere relatively close and can be pulled back at any moment.
Well, and from what you're hearing in terms of the future engagement of the U.S. in Libya, will the mission remain the same, or could things change depending on what's happening on the ground?
Well, the United States actually just issued a statement moments ago, and they said that the role of U.S. forces in Libya will be continuing to degrade ISIS and Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb and other violent extremism groups, preventing them from developing the ability to further destabilize Libya. Basically, they do not want what happened years ago with ISIS taking over many parts of the nation to happen again.
Carla, thank you very much, as always. That's VOA's Carla Bam reporting live from the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia. Now, 25 years have passed since the Rwandan genocide that claimed the lives of an estimated 800,000 ethnic Tutsis and moderate Hutus. As part of the long journey to reconciliation, an aid group has established 4 model villages where genocide victims and perpetrators live side by side as neighbors and even friends. Eugene Huwimana reports from Bugeresa, Rwanda.
Louise Uwamungu was 22 years old in 1994 when ethnic Hutus began slaughtering ethnic Tutsis, including 8 of her relatives. When authorities jailed the man who killed her cousin, she asked her brother, a prison guard, to take revenge.
I gave him the list of prisoners he should kill. I told him, go and set up a scenario where you're taking them out for routine labor. After going out, shoot them. You will say that they were escaping.
Uwamung's brother refused to murder the prisoners. And in 2007, Cyprien Matabaro, the man who killed her cousin, was not only released, but became her neighbor.
That cousin of Louise I killed, we found him in the forest, trying to run. He fell down because he was very hungry. I took him and cut him twice with a machete. Then he died.
Matabaro, who admits to killing at least 3 other Tutsis, was one of tens of thousands pardoned as part of reconciliation efforts after the genocide. But moving into a village with his victim's family raised fears of further violence.
Due to that fear we were imprisoned with, after arriving in the village I had the same worries. But another spirit told me the presidential pardon will help you in reconciliation. And I used to ask my children when they came to visit me in prison, is there any Tutsi who can talk with Hutu? But my children comforted me, saying Hutus and Tutsis share drinks and even marry.
Indeed, the genocide perpetrator and victim eventually became friends.
After he begged for forgiveness, he told me where he put my cousin's body. And I realized we had buried all the bodies that were where he said they would be. And I felt relaxed, because we never accept that a relative has died until you've given them a decent burial.
Built by a faith-based group, Prison Fellowship Rwanda, the Village of Unity and Reconciliation became home to 110 genocide-affected families like Matabaro's and Uwamung's.
It was not easy to join 2 people who have experienced difficult sides of history. The first challenge was trauma for survivors and self-restraint for perpetrators. They were not sure that they are actually pardoned. Survivors also feared that perpetrators could repeat history, but as we keep on encouraging them to do their projects together, those fears have gone.
While the 1994 genocide tore Rwanda apart, Villages like this one have helped put the country and its people back together. Eugene Uwimana for VOA News, Bugesera, Rwanda.
Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Still ahead on Africa 54, explaining the uptick in global life expectancy. But first, a look at Tuesday's headlines.
In Libya, as fighting rages around Tripoli, the UN calls for a temporary humanitarian truce to allow civilians to flee combat zones. The World Health Organization says nearly 50 people have been killed and about 180 others have been wounded as Eastern forces seek to take Tripoli. In Sudan, soldiers fire into the air in response to security forces firing tear gas at anti-government protesters in Khartoum. In Algeria, police fired tear gas and water cannons at student demonstrators gathered in the capital for a 7th week on Tuesday. Finally, rival supporters of Democratic Republic of Congo's President Felix Tshisekedi and his predecessor Joseph Kabila clash in a southeastern city, leaving at least 11 injured before elections for the region's governorship.
Well, it's time now for a health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Madu with new details on worldwide life expectancy. Lino.
That's right, Vincent. The World Health Organization says global life expectancy grew by 5.5 years between 2000 and 2016. On average, a child born in 2016 can expect to live 72 years, up from 66.5 in 2000, according to the annual World Health Statistics report. The first 16 years on the century has seen dramatic drops in death among children under age 5, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, where progress has been made against malaria, measles, and other communicable diseases. Life expectancy is also increasing thanks to advances against HIV/AIDS. But despite progress in poorer countries, the WHO says there remains significant life expectancy gaps between developed and developing nations. While most people who die in rich countries are old, nearly 1 in 3 deaths in poorer countries are children under 5. The UN Health Agency also stresses significant gender differences in worldwide life expectancy.
The key findings from this report is that the life expectancy of men and women in high-income countries are different than the life expectancy for both in the low and middle-income countries. But when we look at life expectancy of women in low-income countries, which is much relatively shorter than the counterparts in high-income countries, and this gap ought to be reduced and closed. The other finding is that we have found that men access healthcare services much at a lesser rate in both high and low income countries, and also they are exposed to unhealthy behaviors including smoking, alcohol drinking, unhealthy diet.
The report was published recently to coincide with World Health Day, which this year focused on primary health care as the foundation of universal health coverage, the World Health Organization's #1 goal. Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus is the WHO Director General.
We're here today to make a strong statement. We're here to say that health is a right and not a privilege. We're here to say all people deserve access to health services they need, when and where they need them, without financial hardship. The bedrock of universal health coverage is primary health care. Primary health care covers the majority of health needs throughout a person's life. It helps to keep people out of hospitals and in the community.
And according to the WHO, progress is being made in countries in all regions of the world, but millions of people still lack access to any health care. Millions more are forced to choose between health care and other daily expenses such as food, clothing, and shelter. Now, health experts say ensuring that everyone can obtain the care they need when they need it, right in the heart of the community, is an essential aspect of primary health care. Joining me from New York for more discussion is Nana Eyason Akiwowo, co-founder and president of African Health Now, an organization dedicated to promoting and providing access to sustainable primary health care to communities in sub-Saharan Africa. Nana, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So this year, the World Health Organization really emphasized the fact that the key to universal health care is primary care, primary access to care. So talk to us about why it's so critical when it comes to primary health care.
For us, I think primary health care, or combating things at that level, is critical to preventative health care, preventing larger issues from coming. What we find is that a lot of the participants in our programs, especially in Ghana and Nigeria, a lot of them have not seen the doctor in years, and you find that we focus on non-communicable diseases, hypertension, diabetes, and also prenatal care. And you'll find that so many of our participants have not gone to the doctor, have no idea about their status, whether they have high blood pressure, or if they do, how to maintain it. So our focus on that space is always because we want to be able to prevent larger issues from coming up later on in time.
So primary health care encompasses many services. What area, what aspect of primary health care has your organization identified as some of the priorities in the communities you service?
We've identified non-communicable diseases such as hypertension, diabetes, early-stage breast cancer, and giving women breast cancer awareness, and as well as focusing a lot on prenatal care. So finding mothers who are pregnant and also realizing that they've not gone to the clinic at all to find out the size, the status, the positioning of their baby. And so those are the things that we find, especially as we deal with a lot of market women in the villages that we support.
So how do you work on the ground concretely when you get into a community? Where does the process start and what do you do?
The process starts with us, with our community leaders. It's really important for us, you know, as Africans, we are very community-based, and so it's really important for us to go in and make sure that we're communicating with the community leaders what our goals are, what we intend to bring into the community. We set up, within a 24-hour period, a mobile health clinic in large marketplaces within a 24-hour period. And so for us, making sure that the community leaders, the women in the market also understand our goal and what our intentions are is a very key piece to us. We have program directors who are continuously on the ground, making sure that we have our finger on the pulse of what people need. And so that's kind of how we've focused our work.
And briefly, before we wrap, what do you hope to see in the next 5 years when you look at the type of impact you've had so far?
I think for us, what we've realized is that as an NGO, we know that our role is in partnership with the government, is in partnership with corporations. And so what we hope to see is that as we grow as an organization and as we grow as a country, as a continent, that we can continue these immense partnerships that work together to kind of provide people with the access to free primary health care.
Wonderful, Nana. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And that was Nana Eyason Akiwowo. She is co-founder and president of African Health Now. And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter at Lenore Moudou. Vincent, back to you.
Well, thank you very much, Lenore. Now be sure to watch Lenore Moudou's health reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. U.S. Attorney General William Barr is testifying before House Appropriations Committee on Capitol Hill on Tuesday, where he's facing tough questions about Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report on the investigation into Russian meddling in the 2016 U.S. election. The purpose of Barr's appearance is to discuss the Trump administration's proposed budget for the Justice Department for the fiscal year that begins in October. But his controversial 4-page summation of the Mueller report is generating the most attention. Barr wrote there was no evidence that President Trump or anyone associated with his campaign conspired or coordinated with Russia to influence the election in Trump's favor. The Washington Post and the New York Times reported that some of Mueller's investigators have said that Barr failed to adequately portray the findings of their probe. The report says members of Mueller's team believe the evidence they gathered on obstruction was alarming and significant. Well, and now here's what's trending. That's right. In Johannesburg last Saturday, South Africa's youngest DJ rocked a crowd at an outdoor concert. 6-year-old Oratilwe Longwane, or DJ Arch, likes to mix house party music for fans and often gets to play for a packed audience of mainly children. DJ Arch's journey into the world of music started at just 8 months old when his father bought him an iPad for educational games, but noticed his son was more interested in a DJ app instead. What next up? A Lebanese fashion designer gives old clothes a makeover, offering her customers a chance to try new styles while saving some cash at the same time. Mahida Tobi's customers can bring used clothes to redesign them, exchange them for other items, or even just donate them to the Beirut store. The shop also sells dream catchers, customized pillows, handmade blankets, gadgets, and other household items. Upcycling is used in the fashion world, reflecting an increased interest in eco-friendly and cheaper products. And a growing number of companies are focusing on upcycling, although the trend is still in its infancy, with industry-wide figures yet to be produced. Well, and finally, South Korea's first artificial intelligence-designed clothing is drawing a lot of customers to a store in the South Korean capital, Seoul. Designers at Disnovel used an AI program to analyze, process, and modify over 330,000 images to algorithmically generate the graphic on the hoodie. The company already boasts a database of nearly 600,000 pieces of clothing information, while an additional 1,000 to 3,000 pieces of clothing are still being updated every day. The introduction of AI technology enables fashion design companies to analyze the latest trends and demand in the market. And that's what's trending today. Well, and that's our show for today. Now be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com for more news. Tune in to VOA's evening radio show Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC and in the morning to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks for watching. From all of us in Washington, have a good night.